The year is 1915. The Great War has swallowed Europe whole. Millions of men march off to the trenches, never to return. But in the quiet town of Tooting, South London, one boy had other plans. He was just 12, not old enough to vote, not old enough to shave. But somehow, Sidney Lewis believed he was old enough to fight. He didn't pack toys. He packed a lie, a forged age, a made-up identity, and a heart pounding with the thrill of becoming a man too soon. Most boys his age were dodging schoolmasters. Sidney? He was dodging bullets. And he wasn't alone. By the time the truth surfaced, Sidney had already lived through hell. He had fired a rifle, marched through blood-soaked mud, and watched grown men break in ways no child should witness. You've heard stories of heroes, decorated veterans, medal-wearing legends. But this story is not about medals. It's about deception, innocence, and a boy who vanished into the chaos of war, and somehow came back. This is not fiction. This is the true story of the boy who fooled the British Army, the boy who went to war before he even hit puberty. This is the story of Sidney Lewis. Sidney Lewis was an ordinary boy by all appearances. Raised in the suburban streets of Tooting, South London, he played marbles, scraped his knees, and had a mother who worried he'd forget to wear his coat in the rain. But something about Sidney was different. He was restless, fiercely independent, a boy who craved more than what school books or playgrounds could offer. He listened to war stories, read the newspapers, stared at recruitment posters calling on every able-bodied man. And maybe, just maybe, he saw himself in those uniforms. Then one morning, he vanished. No goodbye, no warning. Just a boy-sized hole left in the world of his mother and father. They feared the worst: kidnapping, gangs, the river. But Sidney hadn't disappeared into danger. He had run straight toward it. Somehow, with no papers, no parental consent, and barely the shadow of a mustache, Sidney walked into a recruiting office and convinced the British Army he was 19. It should have been impossible, but in the chaos of wartime, age checks were rushed. The need for soldiers outweighed scrutiny. He was given a uniform, a rifle, a number, and just like that, the schoolboy vanished. Now Private Sidney Lewis, of the East Surrey Regiment, marching to the front lines. No one, not his parents, not his teachers, not even the British Army, realized just how young he really was. Sidney arrived in France in the dead of winter. The East Surrey Regiment was reinforcing the Somme, a battlefield soon drenched in blood. His boots didn't fit. His rifle nearly towered over him. And the trenches, they were nothing like the romanticized images back home. Mud up to the knees, rats as large as cats, shellfire screaming like banshees. But Sidney said nothing. He didn't flinch, didn't cry. He was a boy pretending to be a man, and each day he survived, the lie lived longer. His voice hadn't even cracked, but he mimicked the swagger of older soldiers. He followed orders, cleaned wounds, hauled ammo. And when the whistle blew, he went over the top. He ran beside men twice his size. He dodged bullets, crawled through barbed wire, reloaded with trembling hands. He didn't ask when it would end. He didn't dare. Nights were the worst. Cold beyond reason, filled with sobs and prayers. Sidney just stared into the dark, hoping no one saw how young, how scared he really was. His silence became armor, not just from bullets, but from exposure. To his comrades, he was simply a new recruit. But Sidney knew he was hiding a secret far heavier than any gear he carried. In those cold, quiet hours, the war wasn't just killing men. It was erasing children. Back in Tooting, Sidney's mother grew frantic. The letters stopped. The silence grew loud. She visited the War Office, asked, pleaded, demanded. The officials smiled and waved her off. Your son must be mistaken for someone else. He's too young. But then came the photo. In a local paper, amidst grainy images from the front, she saw him, Sidney, in uniform, holding a rifle, and everything changed. The War Office scrambled, recruitment papers were pulled, birth records reviewed, and there it was, Sidney Lewis, age 12, listed as 19. It was an institutional embarrassment. The reaction wasn't rage, it was shame. The system had failed, and now it had to clean the mess quietly. They issued a discreet discharge. No headlines, no apologies, just a stamp note. Return to civilian life. But Sidney didn't return home the same. He was withdrawn, quiet. The sparkle in his eyes dimmed. School felt alien. Friends felt distant. He had seen too much, too fast. Neighbors whispered. Some praised his bravery. Others muttered about bad parenting. But none of them really knew what it meant to be 12 and have fired at a man. His mother held him close. But no embrace could undo what war had carved into him. Sidney hadn't just gone to war. He had aged a lifetime inside its trenches. The letter that exposed it all came in silence. Sidney's mother had written, begged, and fought. And now she had the proof. A boy soldier. A system that had swallowed him whole. The War Office, caught red-handed, had no defense, no court-martial, no press, just quiet dismissal. He was discharged on family grounds, but the truth couldn't be buried. Sidney came home, not with medals, but with nightmares. No celebration, no validation, just the echo of war in a child's bones. He spoke little of it. The few friends who knew couldn't understand. He had skipped childhood, traded it for bullets and blood. For Sidney, the fallout wasn't political, it was personal. Trust fractured, innocence shattered. And yet, the world moved on. He returned to school briefly, but felt out of place. Adults tiptoed around him. Kids stared. At 13, he wasn't a war hero. He was an awkward silence in a society eager to forget its mistake. But some things don't stay buried. In the 1970s, decades later, the British government declassified war documents, and there, in yellowed papers, his story was rediscovered. Sidney Lewis, enlisted age 12, confirmed by birth records, validated by war archives. He had been telling the truth all along. And now, finally, the world believed him. But Sidney had already passed, gone before his story became legend. He never knew how history would remember him. But today, we do. Sidney didn't live his life as a symbol. He lived as a man shaped by silence. After the war, he worked simple jobs, married, had children. But never once did he chase the spotlight. He never paraded his experience, never sought attention. He lived humbly, quietly carrying the war inside him. Friends say he rarely mentioned the trenches. And when he did, it wasn't to impress. It was to warn. For decades, no one truly knew what he had done, until history came knocking. When his records resurfaced in the 1970s, newspapers ran the story. Historians double-checked. And at last, it became official. Sidney Lewis, the youngest confirmed British soldier of World War I. But he wasn't around to see it. Sidney died in 1969, never knowing how extraordinary the world would eventually find him. No fanfare, no grand memorials, just a modest grave, and a story that would finally be told. Sidney's story is singular, but not unique. Over 250,000 underage boys enlisted in World War I. 250,000 lies whispered into recruiting offices. Some were 16, others 13. A few, just 11. Many forged their papers. Most were waved through by desperate officers. They didn't understand war, but they understood pride, adventure, belonging. Britain needed bodies. The Empire needed sons, and no one asked too many questions. These weren't battle-hardened warriors. They were children. children who traded marbles for bayonets, who fell in love with uniforms and died in them. Some made it home, many didn't. And for most, their stories were never told. Their names lost to time. Their childhoods buried under poppies. No special medals, no apologies, just silence. But every time we speak Sidney's name, we speak theirs. Every chapter we write about a boy in the trenches is a tribute to the many who never wrote one themselves. They weren't just child soldiers. They were sons, brothers, kids with scraped knees and oversized helmets. And they remind us of one terrible truth. In war, the young always pay the highest price. Sidney Lewis didn't win battles. He didn't make war plans, but he revealed something deeper, something disturbing. That in the fog of war, even a child can disappear in plain sight. He wanted to matter, to serve, to belong. And in chasing that, he exposed the machinery of an empire willing to trade innocence for firepower. He fooled the system. But the system also fooled itself. They gave a boy a rifle, a number, a uniform. And in return, he gave them his childhood. Today, we don't remember him for medals. We remember him for the question he leaves behind. What does it cost to become a man before your time? Sidney Lewis never asked for fame, but history gave it to him anyway. Because buried in his story is a truth we cannot ignore, that war doesn't care about age, and sometimes, neither do the people who send boys to fight it. Let us remember him, not just as the youngest soldier, but as a symbol of all those who grew up too fast, for a world that grew cruel even faster.